Hello, hello, my friends. Happy April 1st. What a day. Nice spring day out there. Got the windows open for a little bit today. It was really nice. Really nice out. My nice walk this morning. We are doing great in our book. We are on track, and I hope they've been saying this. We might be able to finish this bad boy. Maybe Friday. I don't know. Definitely going to take Saturday night off to spend with the boys, but I think without a doubt we're going to be starting a new book soon. So, but we're getting there, right? Last night, excuse me, last night, Adam and other men, excuse me, from the surrounding area all met up at that pasture, right? Then they decided, okay, here we go. A rider came from Concord, from Lexington, from the North Bridge, and said they're on their way. And they were all hiding behind a wall when a British soldier caught up, or I should say, rode up, an officer, and he was killed. And he was dragged, his horse dragged him up over the stone wall, and Adam saw his head smash into the stone wall. And that is when, that is where we left off. And Adam is talking about this is his first real initiation into this war. So let's pick up there from there, my friends. I'm gonna have a sip first. A sip of my fine drink here. Wet the whistle. And here we go. Now the redcoats were coming. The gunfire was part of the dust cloud. Excuse me. And on the road to the west of us. I must state that the faster things happen, the slower they happened. The passage and rhythm of time changed, and when I remember back to what happened then, each event is separate and a frozen incident. In my recollection, there was a long interval between the death of the officer and the appearance of the first of the retreating redcoats. And in that interval, the dust cloud over the road seems to hover indefinitely. Yet it could not have been more than a matter of seconds. And then, from the front, British Army came into view. It was only hours since I had last seen them, but they had changed and I had changed. In the very front, 2 men were wounded and staggering along, trailing blood behind them. No drummers here, no pipers, and the redcoats were covered in a fine film of dust. They marched with bayonets fixed, and as fixed on their faces was anger, fear, and torment. Rank after rank then came down the road, and the faces were all the same, and they walked in a sea of dust. "Committeemen, hold your fire," a voice called. And what made it even more terrible and unreal was that the redcoat ranks never pushed for an instant. Only some of them were glancing toward the stone wall, but from behind which a voice came. The front of their column had already passed us when another officer came riding down the side of the road, not 5 paces from where we were. My cousin Simmons carried a musket, but he had loaded it with birdshot, and as the officer came opposite him, he rose up behind the wall and fired. One moment there was a man in the saddle, the next a headless horror on the horse that bolted through the redcoat ranks. And during the next second or two, we all of us fired into the suddenly disorganized column of soldiers. One moment, the road was filled with disciplined troops, marching 4 by 4 with a purpose, and implacable as death. The next, a cloud of gun smoke, covered by a screaming fury of sound. out of which the redcoat soldiers emerged with their bayonets and their cursing fury. In the course of this, they had fired on us, but I have no memory of that. I had squeezed the trigger of my gun, and to my amazement, it had fired and kicked back into my shoulder with the force of an angry mule. Then I was adding my own voice to the crescendo of sound, hurling more vile language than I ever thought I knew, sobbing, shouting, and aware that if I had passed water before, it was not enough, for now my pants were soaking wet. I would have stood there and died there if, excuse me, I would have stood there and died there if left to myself, but Cousin Simmons grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip and fairly plucked me out of there. And then I came to some sanity and plunged away with such extraordinary speed that I outdistanced Cousin Simmons by far. Everyone else was running. Later we realized that the redcoats had stopped their charge at the wall. Their only hope of survival was to hold the road and to keep on marching. Good evening. So we talked about last night that Solomon is saying this is the best bet for them to do some damage to the redcoats, was to let them go out, let them get tired, and let them come on back. And on their way back to Boston, they'll attack them. So we tumbled to a stop in Deacon Gordon's cow hole, a low-lying bit of pasture with a muddy pool of water in its middle. A dozen cows mooed sadly and regarded us as if we were insane, as perhaps we were at that moment, with the crazy excitement of our first encounter, the yelling and shooting still continuing up the road, and the thirst of some of the men, which was so great that they waded into the muddy water and scooped up handfuls of it. Isaac Pitt, one of the men from Lincoln, had taken a musket ball in his belly. Though he had found the strength to run with us, now he collapsed and lay on the ground dying, the Reverend holding his head and wiping his hot brow. It may appear that they were cruel and callous, but no one had time to spend sympathizing with poor Isaac, except the Reverend. I know that I myself felt that it was a mortal shame for a man to be torn open by a British musket ball, as Isaac had been. Yet I also felt relieved and lucky that it had been him and not myself. I was drunk with excitement and the smell of gunpowder that came floating down the road. The fact that I was not afraid now, but only waiting to know what to do next. Meanwhile, I reloaded my gun, as the other men were doing. We were less than a quarter of the mile from the road, and we could trace its shape from the ribbon of powder smoke and dust that hung over it. Wherever you looked, you saw committeemen running across the meadows, some away from the road, some towards it, some parallel to it. And about a mile to the west, a cluster of at least 50 militia were making their way in our direction. Cousin Joshua and some others felt that we could march toward Lexington, take up new positions ahead of the slow-moving British column. But another group maintained that we should stick to this spot and this section of the road. I didn't offer any advice, but I certainly did not want to go back to where the officer lay with his brains bashed out. Someone said that while we were standing here and arguing about it, the British would be gone. But Cousin Simmons said that he had watched them marching west early in the morning, and the moving of a much brisker pace, it had still been half an hour for their column to pass. What with the narrowness of the road and their baggage and ammunition carts. While this was being discussed, we saw the militia to the west of us fanning out and breaking into little clusters of 2 and 3 men as they approached the road. It was the opinion of some of us that these must be part of the committeemen who had been in the Battle of the North Bridge, which entitled them to a sort of veteran status, and we felt that if they employed this tactic, it was likely enough the best one. Matthias Dover said, "It makes sense. If we cluster together, the redcoats can take advantage of it. But there's not a blessed thing they can do with 3 of us except chase us. We can outrun them." That settled it, and we broke into parties of 2 and 3. Cousin Joshua Dover decided to remain with the Reverend and poor Isaac Pitt until life passed away. He was hurt so badly that it did not take long for him to leave this world. I went off with Cousin Simmons, who maintained that if he didn't see me, he didn't know who would. Good heavens, Adam, he said. I thought one thing you'd have no trouble learning is when to get out of a place. I learned that now, I said. We ran east for about a half mile before we turned back to the road, panting from the effort and soaked with sweat. There was a clump of trees that appeared to provide cover right up to the road, and the shouting and gunfire never slackened. Under the trees, there was a dead redcoat, a young boy with a pasty white skin and a face full of pimples, who had taken a rifle ball directly between the eyes. 3 men were around him. They had stripped him of the musket and equipment, and now they were pulling his boots and jacket off. Cousin Simmons grabbed one of them by the shoulder and flung him away. God's name, what are you to rob that dead? Excuse me. What are you to rob the dead with? The fight going on, Cousin Simmons roared. They tried to outface him, but Joseph Simmons was as wide as 2 average men, and it would have taken a braver man than these to outface him. They blustered, then they took off, and I asked Cousin Simmons who he thought they were. Never saw him before. I'll tell you they're no committee men. I'll tell you that, Adam. Most likely they're Boston men, the way they behave. He didn't think highly of Boston men for reasons I went into earlier. I couldn't help looking again and again at the face of the dead redcoat. What stuck me hardest was how small he was. Perhaps it was his position in death, but he appeared no taller than my brother Levi, and his purple lips were drawn back with a mouth half toothless. His blue eyes were wide open, and his face was so thin and pinched and starved that I became sick all over again, and I wept as I vomited. Cousin Simmons pulled me away, and then as we approached the road, he got down on his knees and he crawled. I did as he did, and soon we were in a space between 2 rocks, with the road a bit beneath us and some 50 paces away. There was no powder smoke here, but westward, where the road ran through a dip, there was a great deal of firing and a whole cloud of smoke. Here the redcoats were plainly visible as they trudged by, their faces grim and murderous. Their scarlet coats were no longer bright. 2 dead redcoats lay on the edge of the road, on the side away from us. 4 others who were wounded, while it was loaded with the dead and the wounded. There must have been a half dozen dead bodies already in the cart. 2 wounded men shared a space with them. Now 2 more dead and 4 more wounded filled the cart to overflowing. We could hear the wounded moaning and cursing in their pain as the cart went by, and Cousin Simmons whispered that war was a dirty and terrible business. We don't know any of them, I whispered back. They're strangers here in our land. We don't know who that boy was back there. We'll never know his name. No one will. We got to make war with them, Adam. Then let's shoot. I can't stay here like this. His hand gripped my shoulder. Easy, he whispered. Now, 1, 2, and then we both fired. A redcoat flung out his hands and fell. 2 others yelled in pain from my birdshot. Then the whole column was screaming curses in our direction and loosing a volley of musket fire. We lay pressed to the ground as the balls whined overhead and buried themselves in the trees. Then we leaped up and we got out of there, racing through the woods, leaping a stone wall, and then panting and listening to the cursing rage and the constant sound of gunfire. Water, please, I begged Cousin Simmons. He handed me his bottle and said, finish it, Adam. Then you can get water at the Atkins place over yonder. I drained the whole bottle, stared for a moment at Cousin Simmons, and then said, no more. Isn't it enough? That's not for me to say, Adam. Listen to the gunfire. That's our flesh and blood fighting out there. Can you just walk away from them? Will it bring my father back? I asked. No, Adam. Nothing will bring him back. But we're not fighting for an eye to eye and a tooth to tooth. That's how old Solomon Chandler sees it, but the scripture is not meant to be taken literally. And some would have it. This is a war, Adam. Why? Why? A man's land is his own, Adam. A man's place is his own. All we wished when we stood out on the common was to tell them that this was our place. We had no riches or gold or silver. Your father would have said to them, go home and leave us be. This is our place, our common, our meeting house, and our houses. We are committee we are a committee to defend what is ours. There will be trouble if you march into our land and work our will with us. That's all he wanted to say to them, but they chose to have it differently, and now it's too late. The war is all over us. He rose and pointed southward, where a broad wheat field sloped up to the horizon. Men were coming across it. The word went out, and the sound of shots carried farther than you could hear them. And all morning men had been coming, and still they were coming as news was passed on. We went on to the Atkins place. They had a barn that was less than a quarter of a mile from the road. On the peaked roof of the barn, 4 riflemen stood, firing as carefully as if you were on a turkey range. Solomon Chandler was one of them, but I no longer felt any warmth toward the old man. I would kill and he would kill, but he took pleasure in killing, cold as ice. He stood up there on the roof and picked his targets from the smoky road. He waved to me and shouted, "I got me a redcoat officer, laddie boy." There he was up on the road on his prancing horse, 300 paces. I picked him off just neat as a feather. The hand of Jehovah reached down and smote him. Another man joined us below and called up to them, "Can you see the whole redcoat army?" "Where there ain't smoke, you can see it, but it ain't the whole redcoat army. Oh no, not by a bushel or two, no sir." As a matter of fact, the road was defined by the powder smoke that lay over it. The noonday sun was overhead, and it was windless, unseasonably hot day. Some of the smoke drifted and dissipated, but most of it hung over the road like a thick curtain, a fact that the redcoats should have thanked God for, since without the smoke to cover them, it was questionable whether a man of them would have gotten through. We learned later that the British commander, who was ready to surrender his army at this point, but there was no one to surrender to. And often enough, lying sleepless at night, I imagined how that march must have been for them redcoats. Trudging down that burning road, the dust, the powder, smoke choking them, a pale sun burning through, and the Middlesex men hidden behind stones and walls and trees. The firing never stopped. It blazed up at one point and then at another. About 30 men had gathered at the Atkins place, and we went up to the road to fire a volley into it. Then we went back to the well, where the Atkins women were drawing water. All our fear of the redcoats had vanished, and somehow we knew as certainly as if we had signed a paper to such effort that they would not break their march or leave the road. Yet perhaps not all our fear, for there was one thing we did not do, and that was to blockade the road to stop them. It was one thing to fight them as we were fighting them, something else to stand up to their muskets without cover. Mrs. Atkins and her daughter Esther and her 12-year-old son Ishmael were all drawing water and working at the well fit to break their backs. They were good-hearted people, the women a little subdued by the number of menfolk in their family, and a good deal bewildered by the fact that a part of the war was being fought a quarter-mile away. Aside from them thoughtfully placed along the British line of march, the well was a deep one, with a considerable reputation for cold and pure water. When we got there, Cousin Simmons couldn't bear to watch these women breaking their backs over the well handle. He said he didn't think the war was any reason for men to turn into hogs and women into slaves. He took over the handle himself, and then he shamed some others into turns. Those women had raised 50 buckets out of the well already, and anyone who ever turned a well handle knows what that means. Myself, I must have drunk half a bucket of ice-cold water, sweet as honey, and some more to pour over my aching head. The Atkins women had brought out every scrap of bread and provision in their house. No one went away there hungry. I was wolfing down some sausage and bread when Esther Atkins came over to me and asked whether I was a Cooper boy from Lexington. I said I was. She was a handsome girl of 17 or so, with black eyes and black hair, and it was said that she had more suitors than a dog has fleas. The last time I saw you, you were just a shaver. I'm 15, ma'am. I heard all about your father, Moses Cooper. He was your father. Yes, he was. I'm sorry. Oh, indeed I am. One of her own brothers would be dead before the day was finished, but neither of us knew that then. She brought me a piece of berry pie, and out of the kindness of wanting to do it for me. Many people were kind and gentle on that day. It wasn't unrelieved horror, and fewer were cruel than you might have thought. I saw at least 3 men carrying wounded neighbors on their backs. There was another incident as we moved eastward that was worth remembering. You see, about 30 men had gathered at the Atkins place. Some of them were Lincoln townsmen who had come up with cousin Joshua Dover, and others were from the neighborhood and from across the Sudbury River. 2 of these were in the fight at the North Bridge, where Yankees of Massachusetts fired upon the British for the first time. Although they held, as we did, that not a young, excuse me. Well, I just lost 2 of, let me back up a little. 2 of these were in the fight at the North Bridge, where Yankees of Massachusetts fired upon the British for the first time. Although they held, as we did, that not a man among them fixed his weapons until the redcoats had loosed a volley and slain 2 good Concord men and wounded others. The leader of the Sudbury men was one Allen Beckett, a small, nervous, energetic man who complained bitterly that the battle was being fought without rhyme or reason, that nothing had really been planned, and that for all our cutting and sniping at the British, we were letting the whole army of them escape, when here was a golden opportunity either for capturing them or wiping them out to the last man. For my own part, I was ready to live and let live. I was beginning to react to the sleepless night, and every bone and muscle in my body felt my fatigue. It had appeared to me, from all I had ever read or heard about war, that a battle was fought quickly and then put away to rest and wait for in conclusion in the history books. And I felt that I had been through 3 battles already, and it was enough. But Beckett held otherwise, and he was persuasive enough to bring the men around to his way of thinking. He said that instead of running back and forth to the road and take pot shots at the redcoats and wearing ourselves out in the process, we should head southeast and pick up the Menominee Road south of Lexington, about 5 miles from where we were now. Even without hurrying, we could reach that spot before the British did. As we moved, we could gather to all of us the committeemen we encountered. With even 100 men, we could try to trap the British somewhere between Lexington and Menominee. And if we could hold them up for an hour or 2, we might find that several thousand committeemen had arrived to join us. It all seemed very iffish and offhand to me, but Cousin Simmons agreed that it was at least a plan of a sort, and that was better than just milling around with no plan at all, with everyone a commander and everyone changing his mind. By now, Solomon Chandler and the other riflemen had come down from the barn roof. They gave support to Beckett's plan. The last stragglers of the Redcoat Army had passed by that point of road opposite of us. While we could overtake them easily enough, Chandler was of the opinion that it made far more sense to try to cut them off south of Lexington. More men were joining us, and when we began to march, we numbered more than half 100. We were almost a mile south of Concord Road when we crossed the Lincoln Road. 15 or 20 minutes later, and just as we were crossing it, as luck would have it, a redcoat cavalry patrol came down from the north, perhaps scouting to see whether the road to Lincoln might offer an alternate route of escape. There were 4 of them in patrol, and they came into sight. At least 20 of us fired at them. 3 of them whipped their horses around and got away, but the 4th fell out of his saddle and lay in the road, his horse standing behind him. It was poor shooting. But I had discovered that it always was poor shooting when men let off their pieces in a hurry, never stopping to consider or take reasonable aim. It was a condition I was grateful for, since it kept good many folks alive who would otherwise be dead. We rushed over. Let me take a quick drink. We rushed over to the fallen man crowded around him, not yet being enough of soldiers to suspect the possibility of a larger force returning. We saw that he was conscious, with a bullet hole in his shoulder. He was a pink-cheeked boy of about 20, and after he had looked at us, he closed his eyes and prepared to be shot to death by the barbarians we had been described to him as being. But his courage wasn't sufficient to prevent tears of pain and fear from rolling down his dirty cheeks. And the sight of him lying there and crying and looking so much like a little boy had its effect on us all. I know that I had a hard time keeping myself from crying. Dr. Cody of Watertown was with us, and although our family had always regarded him as a fraud and a quack, he did a quick and handy job of stopping the bleeding and trying to fix up the wound. Then we picked up the boy and carried him all the way to the Dunn house, where we left him. Some of the men wanted Beckett to ride his horse. I respected Beckett for saying that he would feel foolish up there. And anyway, he differed to Solomon Chandler's age. Chandler was pleased as a boy at riding the British filly, his rifle dangling forward like an old-time lance. Cousin Simmons remarked that there was nothing to bring out a man's innermost character like being up on a horse while everyone else walked along on the 2 feet God gave him. The afternoon. We are really doing good here. Okay. So, Adam has grown up quite a bit. He certainly isn't a boy anymore, and he is grown up quite a bit. Seen some things that most adults won't see in their life, and he is in the thick of it. We're about 1.5 miles to the south of Lexington now, between the Watertown Road and the Menotomy Road, and all that was home to me. All that was warm and sweet and good. My mother, my brother Levi and Granny and Ruth, my relatives and my friends. All of this was a hoot and holler away, just over the hill and across the trees, just so near that I could almost reach out and touch it. But instead of going home, as any sane person would, I was part of a motley group of farmers who were off to trap the British Army and destroy it. It made no sense whatsoever, and I said so to Cousin Simmons. Well, Adam, he said, scratching at his head, it's war now, you know. In wartime, things don't make sense the way they would in peacetime. I had a belly full of war and killing, Cousin Simmons. I know that, Adam. So have I. When you come right down to it, maybe so has everybody here except the old fire eater like Solomon Chandler. But we can't stop. Why not? Good heavens, Adam, we declared ourselves. There's just no stronger declaration of a man's purpose than to take a gun and shoot someone dead. But they shot us first. That's an argument, Adam, and we're past arguments. Gun shooting is a declaration, not an argument. Nobody's going to be calm and reasonable about who shot first. There's been too much shooting already to ever trace our way back. Now we're enemies until one side or another wins its purpose. If we were to back off now, they'd come at us with gallows rope and hang up maybe 100, maybe 1,000, maybe 10,000. We never sleep a peaceful night again. Not ever again, no sir. Then when will it end? When will it end, Adam? I'll tell you when it will end. When we drive them back into their ships. When their ships sail away from here and leave us in peace in our own land. Not until then. You're talking about time, maybe years' time, I said wearily. Maybe years of time, Adam, that's true. I'm talking about today, Cousin Simmons. I'm talking about right now, about going home right now. Heavens to Holland, lad. Where would you go? The Redcoats are no doubt entering Lexington right at this precious minute. They wouldn't catch me. Well, that's a real smart observation. Suppose you tell me how you're going to manage that. I'd crawl up, I muttered. I'd lay there at the edge of town until they left. Why, the place is crawling with them. And you'd go crawling in there. That makes no sense at all, Adam, and you know it. Maybe I do know it, Cousin Simmons. I'm just sick of this whole bloody business. I understand that, Cousin Simmons nodded. You're just a boy, Adam, and you've had a hard enough time of it, and a long day to boot. a terrible long day. Don't you think I'd like to see you out of this? You being my own kin and fatherless? But that's just it. What is? The fact that you're Moses Cooper's firstborn, and there isn't a man here who doesn't know it and doesn't know he was killed in the slaughter. We pause for a few minutes to rest ourselves on the little Barrett hillock. Let's see, what time is it? You know what? We'll stop there for the night. We will stop there because I don't think there's going to be a good stopping point for a couple pages. But we are doing very well, my friends. We are doing very well. And like I said, there's my bookmark. I think a few more nights and we will be all finished up. All right. So, my friends, we'll get into some current events. And I would ask that, anybody that isn't going to act mature and act their age, maybe could just go and do something else. Because there's a number of us that like to hang out and do this every night. And I'd rather not have to deal with any childish nonsense. So, have a good night. All right. So, current events for today, April 1st, ladies and gentlemen. Again, like last night, a lot of different things are coming out of our federal and our state government. I didn't hear a lot. I didn't pay attention today to, is it Daniel McCoy, I think, who is the Albany County executive. But I did listen to Governor Cuomo and part of the, or at least I did not see, but I read a lot about what's coming out of the federal government today. So what Governor Cuomo is telling us today is that he expects that the virus in New York State will peak late April. So they've continued to kind of push this back. And one of the things that he talked about today was the scientists, the doctors that are following this are having a difficult time with the models that they're using. And I guess basically they're looking at a number of different things. They're looking at the number of new cases, the number of tests that they're using, the number of counties where it's moving to, the number of tests in those counties. And I think we talked about last night, I live in a county where I don't even know if there's really been a lot of testing at all. There are three more cases now in Schoharie County. And I saw that where I live in Schoharie County, there's a total of 8 cases, but only 6 of those cases are actually people that live here. But there were 8 new cases in Schenectady County where Mahonison is. So it brought the number up to 93. So when they talk about, and they've been talking about this whole flattening of the curve, they think it's working, but they also know that it should be and could be doing a little bit better. They know that people are not socially distancing as they should. And one of the things that Governor Cuomo talked about today was he said, I do not want to mandate. He said, I do not want to mandate that restaurants have to close. But it is clear that one of the places where people are still coming together is people are still coming to restaurants. There are restaurants that are still serving people and serving people inside of the restaurant, and that's got to stop. He did bring up, the fact that yesterday everybody seemed to come out to the USNS Comfort, and thousands of people were taking pictures, of the boat as it was coming into New York Harbor, and they were not socially distancing. So, it's got to get better. And one of the things that I know in Albany, they've done in Rensselaer County, in Central Park and Schenectady, and now they're starting to do it in New York City, is they're actually starting to remove the basketball hoops, and they're starting to remove things from parks to keep people from coming to the parks and congregating and being close together. So, it's tough. It's getting nice outside. People want to get out there. I got up early this morning. I did a couple miles. I just tried to stay active because I knew I was going to be trapped in the house all day working. But, boy, a beautiful day. I cracked open the windows. Got a little chilly in the house, but, it felt good to get that spring air in here. And it's just a tough time of the year for this to be hitting, because we don't want to be in the house. So some really cool stuff coming out of Albany tonight. There is a company in Rensselaer across from Albany called, I think it's called Renergen. I think Renergen. It's a medical, a company that makes medical supplies, and they have created 500,000. So they've created 500,000 test kits that are going to be coming into New York, and they're donating them. They are not charging the state. They're saying, here you go, New York State. Here's 500,000 test kits. Now that's pretty awesome, right? That's a lot of test kits. But when we think of the, I want to say, I think it's around 18 million people. I'll have to look that up. But I want to say New York State has around 17, 18 million people. That 500,000 is certainly going to help. But we certainly need a lot more if we're eventually going to want to try to test everybody. So one of the things they said they want to try to do is they want to try to test people and find out. One of the things that can help is that if they test somebody and they know that from that person had the coronavirus, and then they fought off that coronavirus, well, what is it about that person? What is it about that person's, physiology, their blood, their whatever, that helped them fight this off? And that may help them come up with a vaccine or some kind of cure for it. So that was some really good news. One of the things that, I don't know, I didn't think we were here yet, but I guess we are. 14 people that have the coronavirus in New York City were brought up to Albany Center. So, I'm assuming what they're trying to do is, before the hospitals down in New York City get totally overrun, they want to bring some people up here, because we have the room up here right now. However, are we going to get to a point up here where we are going to, need those beds? And then what are we going to do with those people? Well, hopefully we're not going to need it. But I was surprised to hear it. I was very surprised. And I know there was a lot of people that were not happy to hear this news. Excuse me. There's always been in New York State, I think, an animosity between downstaters and people that live upstate. If you look at New York City, more than half of the population of the state lives in New York City and on Long Island. And what a lot of people have always kind of criticized, or there have been people that have even suggested that, we should kind of take New York City, build a wall or do something, build a ditch, and kind of break it away and make it its own thing, its own state, because we're A lot of people feel like what we're paying taxes in upstate are going to more people downstate, and that's not fair. So, there's always been this thing between upstaters and downstaters, and or New Yorkers and upstaters. And I think this is kind of adding some fuel to the fire. One of the things that I saw today, so I guess again, good news, bad news. I'm not sure. I was kind of surprised. At Mahonison, we've been using Chromebooks for a couple years now, right? We've been rolling out the Chromebooks, and just today, I guess, Schenectady High School just started issuing them to students at Schenectady High School. So they had a couple different pictures, and had them all rolled out, and they were wiping them down and cleaning them up. And so now Schenectady High students are starting to get those Chromebooks. Hopefully, they've been using some of that technology, so it's not brand new to them. But now they're going to get to take them home. And I'm not sure. Geez, off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many students go to Schenectady High School, but I've got to think it's at least twice the size of Mohan. So I'm assuming it's a couple thousand people, but I'm not sure. Okay, so here's something real interesting. I saw today in the news there is a Dutch cruise boat, and the name of it, I think, is Zandam, and it is trying to dock in Florida. Oh, no kidding, Sydney. So Sydney says that blood type O is less likely to get the coronavirus. I had not heard that, Sydney. Very interesting. So I wonder what that is. Is O the universal receiver? Sydney, you would probably know that. I don't remember. I have B positive, which is the second rarest blood type. So the Red Cross is always bugging me. But anyways, I'm sorry. So this cruise boat is more likely. Really, I gotta write this down. O is less likely. Really, that's interesting. Huh. I wonder when they're going to get that information out to everybody, because that would certainly be like if you're an elderly person and you are A, blood type A, boy, you better double quarantine. I wonder if was that a state study or was that a federal study? Because I think that would be really good information to get out. Though I find a lot of people don't even know what their blood type is. Yeah, type O is universal, right? Well, there's the universal donor and the universal receiver. And I don't remember which one is which. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to the cruise ship. So there's this Dutch cruise ship that is trying to dock in Florida. And there are 300 Americans. And the governor of Florida has said this: the only people we're letting off this boat are Floridians. So thank you, Misty Annabelle. So the governor is ordering that this boat with several thousand people on it cannot let the people off unless they are a resident of Florida. So we're already starting to see things like this. I think I told you guys last night that the Texas State Police are lining up on the Louisiana border. They're not wanting people from Louisiana to come in. And anybody that's from Texas, that's re-entering Texas from Louisiana, has got to go into self-quarantine for, I think, 14 days. So, states are starting to kind of put a dome up over themselves, and they're very careful. And I know we mentioned the other night that I believe it was in Rhode Island, police in Rhode Island were pulling over people from New York just checking out their license plate. Hey, you're from New York. I'm going to pull you over. Get the heck out of our state, right? So, anyways, that was interesting about that cruise boat. We'll see. I'm sure that's going to be in the news. I'm sure that's going to continue to be in the news. Okay. So, we talked about this last night. April 1st, April Fool's Day. Ha ha ha. I just saw a meme before we started to read together. Somebody had a picture of Governor Cuomo, and it looked kind of official. It said, students must, all New York students must repeat this year of school. So obviously it's a April Fool's joke, I think. But today's April Fool's Day, but today's also the day that we pass the budget for New York State, or we want the budget passed by this day. And it hasn't been passed. So 120,000 state workers did not receive a paycheck today. And I know this afternoon, the state Senate, the state assembly, they're still working to try to figure out how to pass something to get these state workers paid. But right now, a lot of people in New York State not too happy, and it's not exactly the right time to lose a paycheck, right? I said that I was going to look this up last night, and so here, or maybe it was 2 nights ago. Here are some actually. Before I get to that, let me do one more thing. So in the Capital District, they've been reporting, though they haven't really been reporting a lot. Gun sales are through the roof, right? People are buying a lot of bullets. They're buying new guns. They're going out there and they're getting their handgun permit. And in New York State, there are state regulations to get your pistol permit, but it's the county that you live in that kind of that is the level of government that issues you your permit. So when you apply for your permit, each county has different. There's the basic. You have to be the basic requirements. You have to be 21. You do have to get reference letters. However, each county has a different number of reference letters. You have to have a New York State and a federal background check done. So you have to have your fingerprints done, and you have to have all that sent out. But, depending on what county you live in, you also have to take a safety test. So in Albany County, it is one of the most, they have just about the most strict rules outside of New York City. And I know at one point in New York or in Albany, you had to have 4 reference letters, and all those references had to be specific people. Like you had to have an employer, you had to have a family member. All of them had to live within the county, and all these regulations. You had to take 8 hours of gun safety, this, that, and the other, right? There's a lot of rules. Whereas in like the county that I live in, it's just not nearly as strict. But there are those basic rules of 21 background checks. And so anyways, in the month of March, 3.7 million background checks were conducted by the FBI database. So in just 1 month, 3.7 million background checks were done. So that's across the country. That's a lot of people going out and buying guns. Last year at this time, it was 2.4 million. So in just 1 year, in the same time of the year, sales jumped, 1.3 million. And when we look at things like this, looking at them seasonally is, it's a smart thing to do, right? It's springtime. It's March. The weather's getting a little better. Maybe gun sales are going up, right? Hey, we're going to go turkey hunting. We're going to go bird hunting. There's not a lot of hunting that happens, when it's freezing out. Deer hunting, at least in upstate New York, ends the first week in December. So for the past 3 months, it's not a huge hunting season. So, those people that are hunting or even just recreational shooters, this is certainly the time of the year that they're going to start buying more guns. But that's a big jump. That's a big jump. So after 9/11, gun sales in our state and even across the country jumped, right? And there's something about a gun and something about being an American that owning a gun makes us feel safe. And I never really understood, like after 9/11, right? We were attacked by 19 men. They hijacked 4 planes and they flew them into the World Trade Center, into the Pentagon, and then another plane. We're not really 100% sure where it was going. But, if an event like that happens again, how is a gun going to help you, right? And certainly people probably thought that there were going to be more attacks, follow-up attacks that might happen, on the streets and whatnot. So having a gun in those situations might help you, but there's certainly something that it's just something I think inside of us. Maybe it's our history where we just think owning a gun keeps us safe. So gun sales are spiking, and I know in the Capital District it's very difficult to find any kind of ammunition in all of these gun shops. So something to keep an eye on. People are scared. They're buying a lot of toilet paper and they're buying a lot of guns. Okay, so here's the biggie, I guess. Well, a couple other little things, and then I'll keep this the biggie for last year. So Home Depot has decided that, and I don't know when it's going to start around here, but I believe this is a decision, a national decision, that they are going to start placing security guards at the store, and they are going to start, or I guess, I don't know if it said security guards or security, and they are going to start to strictly limit the amount of people that are going into the store. And I think it will certainly depend, for instance, we have several of them in the Capital District, and they're all different sizes. So it probably is going to depend on the size of the store. Maybe it's going to depend on, the amount of checkout lines that they have or whatever, that they'll determine how many people can actually go into the store. But it seems like that's something that is, it's on the way. It's going to start soon. We're going to see them start to implement this pretty soon. But the other a great, awesome news that I saw today, the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society, which is an organization that, they take in animals and they find foster homes, they find people to adopt the animals. They now have a brigade of volunteers that if you are quarantined, if you cannot leave your house, and you have an animal, that they are going to deliver food to you, which I think is just outstanding. Today I had to run to the store real quick, and I had to grab a couple things, and I said to myself, I better, and I grabbed, a couple bags of cat food. If something goes down and I can't get out of the house, our cat Stella, she runs this house, so it's really kind of like her house, and she just lets us stay here. She is the queen. So that was real nice news from Mohawk Hudson Humane Society. If it makes you feel good, jump online and throw them a donation. I know that they would be more than happy, even if it was just a couple bucks. All right, so here's the big numbers, my friends. Here's the real big numbers. So if we're talking about a country of 330 million people, right, roughly, at the last census, which took place 10 years ago, right, the new census is taking place as we speak. Excuse me. We're starting to figure out how many people there are in America. There were about 330 million people. So today, 60 million of those people work for 30.7 million small businesses. So in our entire country, the federal government is saying that we have 30.7 million small businesses. That's anything from a landscaping business to a pizza shop, right to a diner, a family diner, whatever. And in those 30.7 million businesses, there are 60 million employees. This is the part of our economy where the government is most worried that is just going to fall apart. And that $2.2 trillion in stimulus that's going to come out, a lot of that has been set aside to try to keep these small businesses afloat. So again, if you think of Rotterdam, excuse me, there's a heck of a lot of small businesses that I drive by every day to work than there are big businesses. So that's a lot of Americans, that are working for these places. And, the fact of the matter is, and I don't want you to think that I'm cold hearted here, but when those businesses die, if those businesses die, and some of them will, new businesses are going to rise up, right? That's part of our economic system, right? Free enterprise. When there is a need for something, someone is going to fill that gap. So, one of the things that I've definitely been thinking about is the beauty salons, the nail salons, the barber shops, all those places. I think they're going to be out of business for a couple months. I think they're probably going to be closed down here. It's already been, a week and a half? Already been a week and a half? I think. It's probably going to be 6 weeks, at least 4 to 6 weeks more. If this isn't going to peak until the end of April, well, that doesn't mean that we're going to flick the switch and everything, everything's back to normal, right? I think the difficult decisions were to close things down, right? Without a doubt, those were difficult decisions. When do we shut things down? When do we start this social distancing? When do we start this program? The decisions that are going to be 50 times more challenging for our government officials to make are going to be, well, when do we open this back up? Because China and Korea and some of these other countries that are already starting to see the number of cases are drastically going down. The curve is more than flattened. Well, they've started to open things back up, and then sure enough, the curve starts heading in the other direction. So we want to get to a place where we know once we ease back into it, or once we get back to it, that we ease back into it. Like right now, I'm just imagining the number of parties and the number of people that are going to go to restaurants and the number of people that are going to go to bars. And we want to make sure that when we kind of open the floodgates, that there still isn't, a quarter of the population out there that is sick. So I think that's going to be a real tough call. Just saying, let's do it. Let's open it back up. And I'm glad that I'm not a government official that is tasked with making that call. I just hope that at the time that the governor and the president make that call, that they have good advisors that they're listening to. It seems as though, and we haven't talked about this in a couple days, but they're balancing economy, health. It seems as though health is the more important thing right now, at least in New York State, right? I just hope that when we get to that, making that decision, when Governor Cuomo makes that decision, that he doesn't say, all right, we've just got to dump the health and let's get the economy going again. But I don't know. You guys tell me. If anybody has any questions too, throw them out there, my friends. Don't be shy. So last night I started this day in history. And so here it is again, my friends. Today is April 1st. 2020, 4/1/2020. And on this day in 1700, in England, apparently April Fool's started. So this is apparently where historians can go back and find that the practical jokes that were being made, or people carrying out practical jokes on one another, started on this day in 1700 in England. In 1621, and no, I was not actually alive at this time, the Pilgrims that came to our country and Plymouth signed a peace treaty with the Wampanoag Indians. Right? They when people from England got here, when people from all different countries got here, there were already people living here, and even though there were tensions in New England, right, in the Massachusetts Bay, what will become the Massachusetts Bay Colony, there was tension at first, and the Pilgrims and the Native Americans came to an understanding, came to an agreement, and they were for some time working and peaceful with one another. But that did not last for long. In 1945, on this day in 1945, actually, I'm going out of order here. Sorry. On this day in 1789, get ready for this name. Frederick Augustus. Oh my God. Frederick Augustus Conrad Muhlenberg became the first Speaker of the House. Frederick Augustus Conrad Muhlenberg, who was a minister, and I believe he was a Lutheran minister from Pennsylvania, becomes the first Speaker of the House under the new Constitution, the House of Representatives. On this date in 1945, United States troops, Marines, landed on Okinawa as they were turning the tide of the war against the Japanese. Here's another interesting one. Here's a big one. This is a big day in history. Get ready for this. On this day in 1963, General Hospital aired for the first time, and the American soap opera was born. So it was this day in 1963, General Hospital hits the air. And if I remember correctly, I think what I read today was that is the longest running show of any other show in the history of television. This day, and we can thank, we're just so thankful for the great impact and quality television and acting that soap operas have brought to our American culture. Okay, back to reality. In 1970, on this day, President Richard Nixon bans the use of cigarette ads on television and radio. So when I was a wee lad, you used to see billboards and in magazines and in a lot of print advertisements, cigarette ads. And the one that I remember too, that I really remember, were the Joe Camel Smokes used that advertisement everywhere to sell on big billboards. And then the other one was the cowboy there, the Marlboro Man. So anyways, the interesting thing was, and I did not know this, apparently President Nixon smoked a pipe, and he would smoke a minimum of 8 oh, it was a joke. Good. Yes. I don't know if she saw the meme. But yeah, boy, I saw that and I went, holy moly, if this is even funny. If students had to repeat, hello, no way. No way. I think the amount of lawsuits that would be filed tomorrow would probably break the court system. But anyways, President Nixon was a smoker. He smoked pipe tobacco, and apparently he smoked a minimum of 8 pipes a day. And but interestingly enough, he knew the damage that cigarettes were doing to Americans, and he signed that law, or signed the bill into law banning the use of cigarette ads on television and radio. And one other thing, so another thing, I guess, geez, I don't want to end on a bad note. I am certainly not a big Marvin Gaye fan, excuse me. But there's certainly a number of his songs that I've heard and used in movies, and certainly I think every American has heard his music from one time or another. I did not know that he was on this day in 1984. He was killed by his father. Apparently, his father was a very mentally unstable man, and I guess he was a preacher, and he was very jealous of Marvin's fame and notoriety. And on this day, the two of them got into some kind of physical altercation, and his dad actually used a pistol that Marvin had given to him as a present, and his dad shot him 3 times in the chest and killed him. And I didn't know that. I'm not a big Marvin Gaye fan, but I don't know, I would have been 11. I guess not that would have been the top of the news that I'm looking at when I'm 11 years old, but I didn't know that about him. So another day, my friends. We're running a marathon, right? We're not running a sprint, and we're taking this day by day, and we're getting through it. And I'm not going to lie to you. There are times during the day where I just want to throw this computer out the window. And I'm really, really getting. I feel like I'm just when I'm going to hit my groove with using the computer and learning to teach from the computer and doing it this way, that we're probably going to be back in school. I'm not going to bitch, right? I'm not going to complain about that at all. But this is what life is about, right? If life was easy, if life was just cruise control, I don't think that the victories would taste so sweet. Right now things are not doom and gloom, but things are just not great. A lot of us are trapped in the house. I know that probably, and I've been thinking about this today. One of the students brought it up in our Google Meet. He's kind of struggling with his parents, like, hey, I got a job and I could go out, I could be earning and burning right now. I could be making some money. But what do you do? You're at that age where you're young adults. You are naturally, I'm not making fun of you. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but you are challenging your parents' authority, which is a very, very natural thing to do. I'm 17 years old. I think that I know a lot. I think I know what's best for me. I don't want to listen to mom and dad. I know what I need to do for myself. So I thought about a lot of you guys today, that I'm sure that there are some of you that probably need it. You probably need to get some money rolling to put deposits down on colleges. So one of our students reminded me today that you guys are 1 month officially away, I guess, from decision day. Is that right? May 1st is when you have to commit. Typically, is that the day that you have to commit to colleges? Can somebody throw that out there for me? Or May 1st or May 15th? So that means, right, that you've got to throw down your $500 deposit or whatever it is. But my suspicion is that probably colleges are going to, number one, colleges are businesses. They're going to understand everything that's going on, and I'm not saying that they're going to waive deposits and stuff like that. But it wouldn't surprise me if they did maybe push back. It is okay. Thanks, Veronica. Um, so, well, well, Veronica, well, I guess, why is it that you want to push it back? Um, this is fresh. You're about a month out. You've been accepted to a bunch of different places. And maybe it's just the real uncertainty of, what is spring gonna, what is this spring, what is this summer gonna bring you? And I guess that, I certainly understand that, but I don't think, I worked for a college for 12 years. And what I know is that, this is a crazy time of the year for admissions, right? They need to get their numbers locked and they need to start planning, right? They need to start saying, hey, listen, next year we need to. Oh, okay. Hello. I should have thought of that. Yeah, good call, Veronica. My bad. You want to go see him again? Sure, absolutely. It's funny. I was thinking about that. I think that the house, when the boys and I bought the house, we came back and saw it. We saw it the first time, and then I think we came back two more times, maybe three more times, to look it over again. So that makes a lot of sense. That you want to go back and visit. So I don't blame you for that. And probably when you commit, you probably have to throw down some kind of deposit. Um, and at this time when people aren't working and people aren't earning as much as they normally would, chucking 250 or $500 or whatever that deposit is down at a college. That's, hey, that's food for a month, right? That's a grocery bill for a month. That's your electric and a couple other bills for a month. So, or a couple months, excuse me. So I certainly understand that. But anyways, I hope all is well with you guys, and I hope to see you guys soon. I really, I want to get out of this seat and I want to get back into the classroom. I don't think I've ever missed my classroom so much, and being up. Uh, yeah, Veronica, sure. Sure, that makes a lot of sense, especially now that I know how much each will cost. That determines a lot. Yeah. I think we're going to have a lot of things in place. And I think you'll probably see colleges start to push that stuff back, and I'm sure they're talking about it. But man, this is a crazy time of the year for the colleges, and they've got to actually, one year. I remember one year that I worked at Siena, they opened school and they were short like 80 beds or something like that. So on move-in day, they were literally going and buying mattresses. They were turning doubles into triples. They were turning, triples into quads. And man, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. So there's a lot that goes into it. And so, they don't want to push it back very far. They don't want to push it back that far at all. But I think you guys will probably be hearing some good news about that soon. So I don't know if you're going to get a chance to go visit again, and it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I'm not too sure about this, but it wouldn't surprise me if some schools are going to put together, or maybe they already have like virtual tours. I mean, certainly like right now, you're not going to go to a school and see any classes being taught. They're done, right? Colleges are done for the year, but you could certainly meet people and see the campuses and stuff like that. So, um, well, anyways, best of luck with that, guys. Keep on trucking. We're gonna get through this. Run the marathon. Don't run the sprint. We'll get there. And like I said, we will. Oh, that's great, Veronica. Cool. Virtual accepted students days. Well, oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, they could probably like put like a GoPro on somebody or something like that, and make them go around the campus and then just take all that and slap it together for people. I mean, I don't know. A lot of people do that kind of stuff these days. So good. Well, like I've said to you guys each night, I miss you. I hope to see you soon. Stay out of trouble. If you need anything, drop me an email, and I'll see everybody back tomorrow night. I forgot to tell you what page we left off on. 161. We're gonna do this. I think we're gonna do it by Sunday night. Awesome job, guys. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see everybody tomorrow on Thursday night. Have a good night.